Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today we have another great guest on. When it comes down to different changes and different things that happen in life and in your business, then a lot of times you ask the question, like, what happens if blank when blank? And there are a lot of things that you could consider, a lot of factors. Well, we decided to bring on a great guest that helps a lot of people in that area, from whether it's estate planning, whether it's business planning. I mean, really helping you fill in that blank so that you can move forward in a very confident way. So definitely stay tuned for our amazing guest sir today. So without further ado, let me bring on our amazing guest, John Strohmeyer. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Terrell.
Absolutely, absolutely. The pleasure is mine. Now, I'm always interested when, you get the chance to talk to, legal professionals. Well, for two reasons. One is because I'm a CPA, for some reason, people think that I guess I can answer legal questions. And I'm like, those are two different fields, guys.
Right. Look, as a tax attorney, I get a lot of questions where I say, I don't know if you can deduct. You probably can. Have you asked your CPA? Because I'm not signing the return. I don't honestly really care. It's that's going to be your problem of whether or not they can actually deduct it. So, yeah, the feeling is mutual.
And then I think the other piece is, I think there are so many different factors or so many different questions that people probably should be considering, whether it's estate planning, whether it's business planning, as they start, or whether it's trust, as they start to think about those things. So it's always good to, have on legal professionals who can, at a minimum, just introduce people to, hey, here are some of the subject matters you probably may want to consider. So we'll definitely dive into that a little bit more. But before we do that, love to just share with us your background, is kind of what was your first career like?
Oh, yeah.
And then how did that lead into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so what I do now, I am the proprietor of Strohmeyer Law in Houston, Texas. I guide my clients through the maze of tax, estate planning, and probate law to help them leave no unfinished business. So it takes a lot of different forms. But it started after I got out of college. I worked for the Four Seasons Hotels for 4 years, and most of that, 3 years of that, was in management. So I'd show up at the hotel at 11 o'clock at night. I'd leave about 8 in the morning. So Tuesday through Saturday, I was at the hotel, and I was left in charge. It was my hotel with a staff of about usually 13. We had to keep it the Four Seasons Hotel from 11 p.m. until 9 a.m. when we handed the keys over to the a.m. shift. And it didn't turn into the Two Seasons Hotel at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. It had to be Four Seasons the entire time. And you just learned, but that was a great thing. I wasn't just handed over like good luck. It was, how are we going to run this? How are we going to make sure it stays that way overnight? And we did. It was great learning about it. Then I went to law school, figured out I wanted to do tax and estate planning. And the nice thing has been being able to bring what I learned about client service from the hotel, where you and I, as licensed professionals, we've got a little bit of a moat around what we do. It's protected us, somewhat intentionally, insulated us from the market. But now, though that's coming down, CPAs, at least here in Texas, you can have non-CPAs owning CPA firms. Texas doesn't allow non-lawyer ownership of law firms yet, but that's coming. And so, as professionals, I'm thinking about how can we do that, but also, for my clients, how do we take better care of them? How are we making sure that they're leaving no unfinished business?
Nice. I love it. I mean, and it's one of those interesting things I always say. Like I was talking, I forgot who I was talking to the other day, and I was like, when it comes down to estate planning, it seems like there's this interesting dynamic of, you're in an industry where people don't like to talk about death, and they don't often like to plan ahead. So just
right.
Like, do you find that to be the case in, as you're working with people?
Oh, absolutely. What I like to think about is, clients are coming to us, they need some motivation. It's not like anybody who's coming in is going to be a great client, only because the work, there's no urgency to it unless somebody's died or getting ready to die. Most of the time people are like, yeah, I'll get to it later. So we get a lot of leads where people have reached out and then they just drop off the map. So what I've done is just learned, for my intake staff, we give people essentially 3 strikes, only because we're going to say, look, you're going to have one call with me. We'll follow up in 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that, we're just going to say, strike 3. We're taking you off our radar. Doesn't mean we're taking you off the mailing list, but we just recognize sometimes people say, oh, I'm interested in this, only to find they're just, they were kind of interested, but they're not really ready to move forward. And then it'll be, 6 months, 8 months later, they find that motivation again and we're ready to go forward. But we as a business can't just sit there and like, what about now? What about now? What about now? And annoy them.
That's very interesting because when you think about like I said, the business side of a law firm. I mean, it seems like that takes a lot of a lot of business savvy and like you say business maturity of getting to the point of like I said the nature of what you do. I mean, like you said, the sense of urgency. It's not like you can say, "Hey, we're doing a 2-for-1 special on,"
Right.
to where it's just like being, like I said, mature enough to just realize, like, hey, here's the reality of our industry. Like, we don't have the same levers that other people have. It's not like if you were a family law where it's like someone's like, I want to get divorced today.
Right.
I mean, it's not that case where people are like, well, I want to do my estate planning today. So, how have you found yourself? I mean, the team that you have, how do you find them adjusting to, like I said, that 3-strike policy and just the fact that, hey, some people we reach out to, they're not going to go through it.
It was odd, everything is just little ticks and turns and we figure something out here and there. The 3 strikes, ultimately we came up with it as, I like baseball and it's an easy number to remember. And so how to frame it, working with the guys who are doing the intake for me, they know the rules and figuring out, we're considering, strike 1 is when you have your first call with me and you don't move forward. If somebody just reaches out, we'll kind of give them the similar, hey, we haven't heard from you. Are you ready to move forward? But we're not going to really push them too hard. We push differently once you've actually kind of raised your hand than, if somebody says, hey, John, I passed your name along, that's different than somebody has scheduled that first call with me. And again, it's just every practice is different. Yeah, like you said, for people who want to get divorced today, you need to be on top of them right now. The folks who have been injured or the folks who are, unfortunately facing stint in jail, they have a lot more motivation to be responsive right then versus me. Unfortunately, I've got clients, they have draft documents and we're just, we've got their money. We need to get them across the line to sign their documents. Sometimes like, what do we need to do? We're calling them every week. Are you ready to sign now? We've got these documents. Can you please just come in and sign?
I do think, like I said, that is a very interesting, like I said, dynamic. So I think figuring out the business side of what you do has had to be an interesting journey. So as you've kind of thought through that, I know you mentioned about the small tweaks along the way. Were there any kind of other like resources or like mentors or things that really helped you start making the business clicks on what you do?
Right. So I'm sure you've heard this before. Yeah, as a lawyer, I didn't learn how to run a business in law school. I learned how to be a lawyer in law school. But having worked at the Four Seasons, it was really useful for me to be responsible in a business way. So I'd show up at 11 o'clock at night for 3 out of my 4 years with the Four Seasons. And I was not only the night manager, I was also the night auditor. So I was doing, running books, making sure everything reconciled, entering banquet tickets, making sure all the receipts from the restaurants and the bars checked out, and doing that first cut on the numbers for the day. So learning, look, this is a business. We've got to run things by certain numbers. We're looking at how things run, seeing, you know, in a hotel, there were ebbs and flows. Sure, you kind of knew it, but also seeing, oh, for this hotel, we're a business hotel Sunday night through Thursday night. Fridays and Saturdays, it was a resort style hotel just by the nature of being at the Austin property. But then you'd also see it would dip way down in December and the beginning of January. Travel dropped way off. You'd still have people staying in the hotel, but not as many. And just recognizing there are business cycles that are the just normal ebb and flow of any business, recognizing that and saying, okay, make hay when the sun is shining and be ready to sustain yourself, because the normal amount of money, you'd make in the summer and the fall, you've got to have those receipts and the funds there to still pay everybody when December's there and you've got like 5% occupancy.
Gotcha. That's the dynamic that I don't know if a lot of people prepare themselves. I mean, just for any business, is really starting to, like I said, assess your cycle. So, I mean, with the type of firm and the type of practice areas that you provide services in, do you find that there are like trends or seasonality to your business?
Oh, definitely. So for me, it's when is the family kind of focused on doing the work? We are looking forward to, we're going to do your business or estate planning. There are big cycles. So I know, and I've learned the major one, things pick back up the week before school starts in the fall. And it'll be busy. October is usually one of my busiest months, not only for clients being focused, but this is kind of right in the middle of everybody planning for things. It starts, flattening as we get into November, and it'll take some, dips down in Christmas and the first week of January. Again, once we get back into school time, people are like, oh, the holidays are over. We need to plan for this. And it picks up and it runs until Memorial Day. Memorial Day, it starts dropping, steady off. And then really 4th of July, it drops off from 4th of July again till that second week of August. And again, people are on vacation. They're doing other things. So that's when we take our time off. Those 2 times where Christmas and the summer, those are the good times for us to do other things, recognizing it's going to be a little slower. It's not going to be completely dead. So my job as the owner is now, well, how do I smooth those out? How can I make sure that people are thinking about us a little bit more during the year? And, it's an interesting challenge, just flatten it out. So it's we're seeing fewer dips.
Gotcha. And I think that's you say, an enormous factor to really work through, because it's one of those things I thought about even myself. I mean, my background being a CPA now. The interesting thing is, like, I don't focus on taxation. I focus more on bookkeeping and CFO services. And I remember when I started and talking to a lot of CPAs, and that was one of the things that they said is that, you have massive seasonality. And then the rest of the year, you're trying to figure out, how do I get more of my revenue to like pan out to the rest of the year? So hats off to you for, like I said, jumping into that and starting to think through and figure that out. And speaking of your services, what are the types of services that you and the types of problems you help your clients solve?
Yeah. And so this is where I think about, clients don't just come to me, or nominally they come to me, they want a will because they've heard I need a will or a trust. The reality is they don't care what kind of document they get, give will or trust or, the singing bush that'll just tell people what to do when they die. They want not a mess when they pass. Having done this for over a decade, nobody's ever said, whatever, just complete disaster. Make sure that happens. They want, whoever's getting stuff, they want them to get it. They don't want there to be fights. They want it to, even if they're leaving somebody out, they don't want to cause problems by leaving them out. They don't want the people who are getting things to have to deal with that person. So it's all about, how can we make it easy, and how can we look down the road and say, all right, eventually everybody's going to die. We're going to know that you're going to have some stuff left. It may be, $20 in a bank account. It may be $20 million spread out across the globe. You're going to have a different level of stuff. We want to think about, what does it look like? Who's getting what? And how do we make it easy? So, as an example, got a returning or a client, family is the returning client, but it's a new family member where in the last year and a half, the pandemic, we're not really sure if a document has been put in front of this new family member that he didn't intend to sign, but just health issues, pandemic, kind of all of the stuff that's been going on. He may have signed something that he shouldn't have. How do we go through, not only, it's easy enough to clean up the documents, but if there's a family member who may have snuck something in front of him to sign, leaving a disproportionate amount to that family member, how do we not only put one document in place, but how do we stop that person from, unwinding the real intentions of this one new client? And so it's not just the document's the solution. It's how do we make things easy so when grandma passes, it's easy for everybody.
Yeah. Gotcha. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's something that unfortunately people don't really think about that until they have until they hear about a horror story situation or until they've seen it happen, to someone close to them. So, from a business owner perspective, I mean, because a lot of our audience are business owners, are there any types of, I guess you say, business planning kind of subject matters that come to mind that you say, hey, business owners probably should at least be aware of these type of topics?
Right. So this is the same sort of thing. It's what's going to happen when you leave the business. Sure, you own it now, but is this something that when you stop working, whether it's retirement or you go in the ground, what's going to happen and who's going to take over? So it's not just who's going to run the business, but you're also thinking about who's going to own the business. If you own 10 shares of Exxon, something happens to you, you're not worried about installing the next CEO of Exxon. But if you own 100% of, for me, Strohmeyer Law, if something happens to me, I've got another attorney who will step in that I've already nominated. They've accepted. They'll take over, shut the practice down, and really turn things over to wherever they need to go. So that's level one of just who's going to be in charge. Level two, thinking about, well, are we going to have to buy somebody out? I don't have any partners. But if you're in a business where you have a partner, thinking about, do we need to just buy them out? Are we setting up some sort of company-owned life insurance? Then for me as the tax guy, you as the, you're not practicing in tax compliance anymore, but just knowing that, here's the big thing. Life insurance owned by the company has to be reported to the IRS. You're not paying tax on it, but there is a form for it, and there are other forms that go with it that a lot of times when I bring this up to business owners, they say, wait a minute, we have to be filing what? And, even for me, I own 100% of my LLC. It's taxed as an S corporation. If I had business-owned life insurance, I would have to sign a waiver and a consent to the company getting life insurance on me. And if I have to do that as a sole owner, yes, I assure you, whatever business structure you're in, you need to make sure that you've got those consents in place. Why? That's the way the rules are written. Just deal with whatever they've asked for from you and just get it done.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, and it's always things like that I think people use, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So it's always great to have, insight like that. So, if people are interested in learning more about you and learning more about your firm, and then also just the different exciting things you have going on, where can people find you?
Yeah. So obviously for my law firm, StrohmeyerLaw.com. There it is. Number two, I'm on Twitter, sometimes more active than others, but I got in early, so I get to be John the Lawyer on Twitter. And finally, I do have a podcast on client service lessons, what I learned from when I was in the hotel, applying it to, primarily lawyers, but a lot of the lessons apply to doctors, CPAs, accountants, barbers, gardeners, whatever it is. If people are hiring you to do a job that's not entertainment, pampering, and fun, there are some lessons about how to bring what the Four Seasons taught me to your job so you're taking better care of your clients. And that's Five Star Counsel. Obviously, you've got the link right there to episode 66. It's a good starting point to get my overview of what I think about things and a good jumping off point for all the interviews we have.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, one question I always love asking every guest when they come on, and you can definitely reiterate something you've already said, or it can be something new, is what are two pieces of insight that you would call the audience's attention to when it comes to, hey, I'm speaking to business owners. What are two things I want you guys to keep in mind?
So two things. I'm going to come at it from kind of the both sides that I've talked about. As the attorney and the planner, we're thinking through what messes are you possibly creating? Even if you don't intend to, what are the messes that are lurking in your plan as it stands right now? Because if you know what those messes are going to be down the line, it's a lot easier to avoid them by dealing with it right now. On the other side, client service, coming from the hotel, the biggest mistake I see people making is thinking, look, I'm a lawyer. I need to have some over-the-top experience. I'm competing with Disney and Four Seasons and the Savannah Bananas and whoever else. You're not. Those companies are all about entertainment, pampering, and fun. And when it comes to professionals, whether it's doctors, lawyers, CPAs, engineers, people are hiring us to move the needle for them. And so we need to be focused on that. And so when you do that, it means you're not necessarily spending money on some over-the-top experience unless it contributes to people actually achieving whatever result. So for me, going out and spending money on custom drink menu for the law firm, clients don't really care about that. Sure, do they want a nice experience? We want to be focused on moving the needle on making their plans easy to deal with and getting things lined up for them.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, John, it has been a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much for being an amazing guest.
Oh, Terrell, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.